Good evening, everyone. How are you all doing? Awesome, great. So this is Chai and Just Chat as our panelists are getting ready and setting up to sit down. This is a monthly Chai and Just Chat sessions, and these are on humanitarian topics or community topics they could be hot topics of everybody in our communities. Some of them are not openly discussed, but we create a forum so that it can be openly discussed. Today, we're not going to be chatting a lot because I know you guys are waiting for the result. And as you can see, I'm going green, right? We've been talking a lot about plastic pollution. I've been trying my best to go green. And thank you again. In the interest of time, we are not going to be introducing very in detail our panelists, but definitely Trey is going to put on our PowerPoint and you'll see their profiles soon coming up on the slides. So thank you again to all of you for joining us. And today's topic is on immigration, and it's not going to be a debate, but it's going to be a debate panel. So we're going to be having a discussion, but also a little bit of debate. And as Trey puts on the introduction of the profiles for the panelists, Varnika, let me start with you. We have around 44 million immigrants in United States. Right? Let's take Georgia. We have every 10% population, that is almost 1 million population, who are immigrants in Georgia, right? Okay, and then we have 8% of native-born immigrants such as y'all, who has at least one immigrant parent, right? And that means it's a significant population. Mostly I'm thinking of action. What are 3 words, Varnika, that comes to your mind? 3 words that comes to your mind when people mention immigration at any place at any time?
I think the first 3 words that come to my mind when people mention immigration are innovation, capability, and potential. I think there's so many people in this world, and we all have the capacity to do something amazing.
Sure, thank you. I just want to hear the first 3 words, and then we'll go back to the questions. Anirudh, how about you? What are the 3 words that come to your mind? And this is a common question for all of us, just a warm-up question before we get to the real questions. And if you can look at the audience and have the mic next to you.
Creative solutions, technology.
Okay.
I think of I think of power, drive, and hidden talent.
Great. Adiva.
I think of diversity, representation, and empowerment.
Kennedy.
I think of hope, fear, and ambition.
Great. Ash.
I think of power, diversity, and ability to create change.
Nice. Rishi.
I think about opportunity, persistence, and ambition.
I think about motivation, unification, and celebration.
I think about innovation, representation, and change.
And you will see their profiles running in the background. So, so in the interest of time, I'm not introducing you on stage here. But this is just first question, and you don't have to answer this, okay? Because I know we've not gone into the attorney's knowledge yet. But do you know in the US, we have visas that is named alphabetically? Which are the 3-letter visas that are not out there yet? This side and this side, let me see. Guess 3 letters that is not there in the immigration visa. We have A, B, C. Which are the 3 letters of visa that we don't have in the immigration system?
I believe Y, Z, and there's one more. I'm not sure.
This side?
And
Perhaps like X. I think that's an unusual letter.
Okay, good. You see the combined talent this side? It's X, Y, Z. Did you all know that? So we have A, of course our attorney is shaking her head, she surely knows, but we have all the visas from A to W that serves different population. We don't have X, Y, Z, right? And probably when you all get to become the policymakers at some point, you can create those new visas. But let's start with Kennedy. So Kennedy, people come to US with different immigration policies, based on their different visas. The topmost are the ones who are coming for family reunification, or they're coming for employment-based visa, they're coming for refugee protection, or for their personal with needed skills, right? How do our country's immigration contribute to this nation as a whole today?
Well, every discussion in politics is a discussion between morality and efficiency. Morality being the humanity of the people who are coming into the Americas, and efficiency being the numbers, a number of people who are coming in, the amount of skill they have, their level of education. The four categories you just delineated, I believe they can be separated into these two categories. People who are coming for their families and people who are coming for refugee status, they are coming for moral reasons. They are seeking they are fleeing persecution, and they're coming for their families, and they are coming as humans. People who are coming for their work, people who are coming for the diversity element of the United States, they are adding to the numbers in America. I believe as American immigration policies change, the current policies that we have right now, we are focused on a more moral standpoint, where the people who are coming in are coming for chain migration, as in we are allowing people to be unified with their families. However, with the changing attitude that we have in America, where we are allowing people to come in based off their qualifications, like the merit system Donald Trump just introduced last week, that is our focus, to have immigrants add to the numbers of the United States. So I believe in trying to qualify how immigrants add to the United States, or what they contribute to the nation, we have to consider the standpoints or the viewpoint of America at the time. Right now, immigrants are adding to the numbers and the quantity of America. So immigrants, they are adding in numbers.
Okay, if you can just tell me, what are the two top challenges that new immigrants face when they come to US?
Definitely, I'd say adjusting to the social aspect of the United States. So my family specifically, we're Nigerian Americans. And coming from Nigeria, the majority of people there are Africans. Whereas when you come to America, it is a complete shock, where you are now going from the majority to the minority. So definitely dealing with the social aspect of America, and also dealing with the structured time of American life. So whereas back in Nigeria, if a party starts at 9, you can be there at 11, and everything's still gonna be fine. Whereas in America,
we call that Desi time.
Exactly, we call it African time.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Whereas in America, you have to RSVP before you get to a party, and if you don't show up on time, the party's gonna start without you, and you're gonna miss out.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Kennedy. Omer, we're going to go to you next. And my question to you is, the nation creates laws and policies, especially for immigrants. Sometimes it's inclusive, sometimes it's exclusive, that the entire potential of that particular society is not exhibited, right? So my question to you is, what rights should a person in America have, regardless of their legal status? And also, if you can just answer quickly, why do people come here illegally? And if you can look at the audience and address this question.
So, that's a little bit loud, but there are a couple things that I want to talk about when discussing this. So basically, the first 10 amendments of the United States Constitution that are in the Bill of Rights, those apply to all citizens, but I believe that they should apply to any person, be them, an immigrant or an American citizen who steps inside of the United States' borders. So these are rights to, equally to say whatever you want. The First Amendment, the protections of expressing yourself, or the rights to expressing your own religious beliefs, and being able to have your own individual faith. And even then, it's including protections from a criminal justice perspective. You have to have a fair trial by a jury in criminal cases, and even civil cases you can have that. And I think that the first 10 amendments, these are the most fundamental aspects of American culture and identity. They shouldn't be restricted to just American people, because what happens is, when the United States government distinguishes between an us and a them, the Americans and the illegal immigrants, it creates a tension, it creates a conflict between them. But really, in reality, we all are humans. There is no us or them. We all deserve these same equal rights to be able to say whatever you want, to be able to wear whatever you want, and to express yourself in however many ways you want. We all are humans, and there is no real us or them. We all deserve the same equal rights, whether or not you came to the United States illegally and you suffered a long, hard journey to come here, possibly even risking your own life. If anything, we as human beings have a duty and have an obligation to help these people and to guarantee that these people have the same equal rights that any American citizen has. And going on the second topic of why these immigrants come to the United States illegally, I think there are a number of reasons, as I touched on earlier. The fact is, these people, they might be suffering and they might be undergoing violence, crime, gangs, war in other countries such as in Latin America or even in like Asia or Africa. And because of that, they need to leave and they need to arrive to a safe country, a haven like the United States or what it should be, quickly, and they do not have time to undergo the formal immigration process, which many of you people know is really long. It can take several years, it can take even decades just to come to the United States. And they simply do not have the time. They might not even survive to be able to wait that time. And I think that's one of the main driving factors behind why there is such a high illegal immigration population in the United States.
One final question before I move to Adiba. But are illegal immigrants taking American jobs?
No, and I think the basic reason behind this is when illegal immigrants come to the United States, they do in fact fill up jobs, and many of these are low-level jobs, such as like building houses or like construction and stuff like that. But the fact is that they're actually stimulating our economy because they're helping create and improve these businesses. They're helping, pay for American goods and services. They're contributing to the local and national economies. So in effect, they're actually creating more jobs, helping businesses, improving our American society and the American economy.
Awesome, thank you, Omer. And so Adiba, my question to you is, when September 11 happened, there was this notion of hostility against Muslim countries. And then in World War I, there was the same hostile way of treating against Germans. And then World War II happened with Japanese Americans. And in fact, Japanese Americans who were American citizens were placed on camps too. So why are these backlashes happening to immigrants who are coming to US? I also want to know, why do these tensions arise when they even come as refugees? But the best answer I want from you as a youth is, how can these tensions be decreased?
So going off of the first two topics, I want to take a look at American history because for a long time, we've considered immigrants and foreigners entering our country as enemies. So this really started in like the 1800s when Irish and German immigrants first entered the United States. Even though we weren't in warfare with them, most Americans still saw them as enemies because they were taking away jobs from American-born citizens in major cities. And I think that there's a lot of backlash towards this nativist sentiment. In fact, even during that time, we had a political party that was dedicated just to reducing immigration, and it was called the Know Nothing Party. But I find that the Know Nothing Party and that kind of sentiment is very catastrophic on how immigrants today are being impacted. And what we can do to decrease backlash is to have an easier process in order for immigrants to become citizens, because that way they can essentially prove themselves as being American.
One more question before I move to Anirudh. How can we improve the public opinion about immigrants?
So the public opinion towards immigrants has revolved around immigrants not being American and not fitting into our society. But I think that by improving citizenship processes, by improving the way that we can get access to green cards and visas and have immigrants working in cities more efficiently, then we can establish in media's perspective that immigrants really are a valuable asset to Americans rather than a detriment.
Okay, great. Thank you, Deva. Anirudh, my question to you is, struggling with the influx of applications for people who are applying for citizenship. Now they've crossed the green card hurdle, and there's a huge influx, but the demand is not meeting the supply. So suppose there's an example, let's take a family who has a born child citizen here, but they have become out of status because they've not yet gotten their, and the green card status goes out. What is the anxiety that they go through? If you were in such a situation, would you leave the child here and go back? Or how do you see that rectifying itself?
A lot of times, like a child is like an American citizen and like his parents get out of status, like their visa expires, something like that. Many times the parents like take the child with them, and the child is still an American citizen, so he can like decide to like remain one when he's 18 and stuff. But a lot of times they leave the child behind with like extended family, and then I think the child is able to bring the parents back after like 3 years if they outstay their visa, and the child has some. I think it's like petition for the parents to come back. A lot of times that's what happens.
Okay, sounds good. So if there was something that you could change with American immigration policy, what would it be? Because the situation that you described right now seemed very scary for me. I wouldn't want to be that child.
I would probably change 2 things. I think the first and most important thing is just to be a little level-headed about this, in the sense that if someone says something that sounds a little offensive about like illegal immigration, like maybe like think about it a little harder than what they're saying, not just label them as being like anti-immigration or anything like just be a little level-headed and maybe more centrist on this issue, in the sense that if anyone says anything nowadays, everything's so polarized and they won't look like the facts aren't really coming out. Like we still need to look at illegal immigration as something that is illegal and how the law should apply to it. There are ways to make like the asylum process and the background checks a little bit better, but at the end of illegal immigration is still illegal, and maybe there's ways to just make these guys have like a better experience through it, because I feel like a lot of times everyone's saying treat these guys as, but at the end of the day they are still coming in illegally, and I think sometimes we like forget about that and don't apply the law. Also, the second thing is I think I came to America because my dad is a research scientist, right? And so he gets like the H-1B visa, and I think something that we need I actually support like the merit-based immigration system, in the sense that I don't think one should think of this as a liberal or conservative issue. It's just like it's just maybe in my opinion, it's just like a smart thing to do. Like countries like Australia and Canada have done this, and they wouldn't be considered conservative, really. It's just like a smart thing to do. For those H-1B visas, and increasing the proportion of people who come in with skills into our country is just beneficial for our country as a whole. I'm not saying take away any of these asylum seekers or things like that. I think just be a little level-headed and a bit pragmatic about what we need to do. There's a reason why there's so many immigrants from like India and China and in Silicon Valley, and they're driving the economy of the United States in many cases, and I think just being a little level-headed about this issue.
Great, thank you, Anirudh. How many of you all have seen actually youth on TV talking about immigration? Yeah, a few of you. Don't you think more of that needs to happen? And Anirudh and anyone else, if you all do become the decision makers and go on to Congress and make the decisions, I hope you will exercise what you're saying today, because sometimes it gets polarized being in those situations to make a win. So it's very nice to hear from the youth and your thoughts that we don't get to hear much outside. Yes, go ahead. And let it be quick.
Yeah,
good.
I have a question for you. Why do you think people immigrated?
And that's the question I was going to ask Rishi. Do you want to? Okay, great. Okay, Anirudh, hold on. So Rishi, the question I have for you is, majority of the Americans live between the two poles. One is we are a nation of compassion, and the other is we are a nation of law. right? And tell me in these times that you see, and you are probably 16 or 16, which country are we? Which of the poles are we in? And why do people immigrate to US?
So which I believe they do not know what we should be.
Your thoughts on which one are we now and which one we should be?
Okay, so right now, I think we are, especially in today's polarization, the climate that Anirudh talks about, I think we are in the nation of the law, the standard that, especially the people who are in office right now, that's what I guess Americans believe, right? And that's what we are right now, and what, in my opinion, what we should be is a nation of law. And I agree with Anirudh that I don't want to make this a partisan issue, but the bills proposed in Congress right now, especially the one that was brought up before, the merit-based bill, right? That we need to prioritize immigration based on merit. The reason why I believe we should go to this standard is twofold. The first one is the leadership in immigration. I guess those who believe the latter believe that America should be a leader in immigration, right? And believe that we're abdicating the power of immigration. However, I believe that why should we be the leader in immigration? Why should we be the ones of compassion? Britain's not doing that. They're trying to get out of the European Union for the reason of the Syrian refugees, right? That's Brexit. Australia does the same thing. New Zealand does the same thing, right? So I believe that we should be a nation of laws, but the second reason I believe that is asylum and immigration law can be two different things. They can be mutually exclusive. They don't need to be intertwined. And what I mean by that is you can still have the asylum laws of Obama's period and the immigration laws of Trump in the same time, right? The misconception that I believe a lot of politicians, a lot of public opinion have is that these need to be connected. That if you have a lawful merit-based immigration, that inherently means that you don't believe in asylum. I don't believe that to be true. I believe that you can have separate asylum laws and separate immigration laws, right? Because I believe for that to be true, if you want to connect that, oh yes, we're the nation of passion or compassion, why does that have to be true? Why do we have to be the nation that has to hold that leadership, right? What makes us that nation? So I guess first I would like to see a definition on why is it okay for Britain to do that, to do what they're doing? Why is it okay for New Zealand to do what they're doing, right? And those are the same countries that have universal healthcare, right? So if we're gonna model these countries, why not do everything they're doing? So just because it takes a strong immigration stance doesn't mean we're not a nation of compassion, right? I can argue that Britain's a nation of compassion because they have the simple fact of universal healthcare, right? So I do think that there has to be, I do believe that asylum is an issue, especially with the much debated border crisis, but they don't need to be intertwined. They can be mutually exclusive. That's my opinion.
And quickly, why has the United States been a destination for immigrants?
So, again, that's two things. Number one, I believe America is one of the only countries in which a person who is poor and a person who is rich can have the same chance for success. And if you look at countries like India, that is not true, right? There's absolutely no social upheaval, right? India was based on the system of a caste, right? You have the top level people, then you have the untouchables, and that kind of culture lives on in a lot of countries in which somebody who is poor and somebody who is rich does not have the same chance for success. But in our country, I believe that there is the kind of simple straight road, the straight path that, of course, there is some advantages to being wealthy, but I do believe that our country gives a fair shot to everybody, unlike any other country. That's the first reason. The second reason, I believe, is that our nation has upheld the law so well that, like, I guess some people are getting pissed off, but the point is they're upholding the law, right? Because if you see the way, I guess, for example, why are we, if many of you heard my speech before about the gun rights, the reason why we have guns is it's in the First Amendment. But nothing breaks the law, nothing breaks the Constitution, right? We are able to create a system of law and order, and there's no, the corruption is not like other countries, right? Because we follow the laws, we follow the rules. We're a rule-based society. If you look at the same example I gave of India, that's not necessarily true, right? You see people at the top level, most office positions being corrupt. They're not following the laws that they themselves push, right? So the sense of accountability, the sense of responsibility, that's the second reason why I believe that people come to America.
Okay, thank you so much, Rishi. The next question is for Ash. And as we're going to go back to the backlog of application, I believe majority of people who are here, I'm assuming have come here to US through the H-1B visas, which is employment-based special skills visa. And so US offers 140,000 such visas per year. But then the way people apply for green card and to become a citizen has backlogged so much so that to get a green card it takes decades and decades and decades. By then you become you come out of status and you have to leave the country. How much is that an anxiety to the family whose kids are in high school and who've never been to India and now they have to go back to India? And it sort of goes back to the similar question I asked earlier. What are your thoughts? And what would you suggest to such a family who's going through those uncertainties of what's going to happen tomorrow, because it's been years and years they've not gone back to India, but just to know they have to sell their house and within 2 weeks they have to leave the country because their visa was not extended. And what are your suggestions to those family and the decision makers who are making them do it?
Yeah, so I'll start with the policymakers because I think the law is what creates these issues. First, I think that H-1B visas, which were created in the 90s under the Immigration Naturalization Act, have a lot of loopholes in them. First, they're temporary, meaning that people don't have LPR, legal permanent residency, when they get them, meaning that their visas are temporary. They can be sent back to the countries at any time, which is causing the issues is what you're talking about. So I think that creating them as a way to gain LPR or permanent residency in the United States is a much better issue because then it avoids this kind of loopholes in which people can be sent back. Also, not just in sending them back, it creates another issue in which employers can go to exploit these workers by saying if they overstay their visas that they'll contact the immigration services in order to pay them, underpay them or exploit them further. So I think that changing that system by making it permanent also avoids the exploitation of different workers. Another issue is that there's a cap, which causes a lot of the backlogs. I think if we lift the cap on H-1B visas, it's going to make it a lot more streamlined process in allowing people to gain these visas and then keep these visas within the United States. I think that the law is what creates a lot of the issues for the families. For the families themselves, it's really hard to give them straight advice because there's nothing that they really do wrong. It's more of a legal issue that is affecting these people in different ways. Going back to what some of the boys said earlier and how we should be coded in law and follow these laws and follow these timelines is kind of an issue because we can't always think in thinking of law when the law is what creates such big issues for people. Just because we should follow the law doesn't mean the law is always right. And I think we should really question that as a society because how it is. Someone earlier said that everyone in this country comes because everyone has the same kind of starting point, but that's not necessarily true. There's issues like class and race that we really have to examine and how the law works to kind of exploit people who are already submissed by issues like capitalism and racism that we really need to think about and we kind of just overlook. I think as a society and to these families, we need to think about how different factors play in the law when they're exploited and they're submissed into these separate groups. It's not a kind of your time's up, you have to go, because they have set up and built these lives in America, and so then we should consider them Americans, not just 6-year temporary visa holders, because that's not who they are. Submitting a whole group of people under how they come in legally under a country is just categorizing people in how we shouldn't view human beings in this country.
And Kennedy, before I go to Varnika, I kept seeing your head shaking as she was talking. Is there a specific reason?
Oh yeah, I felt the sentiment that she was sharing where the rule of law isn't exactly always right. So the merit-based system that we were talking about earlier, I did some research on it and I saw that the way people get merit is being skilled or holding a higher level of education or having no criminal record. So if we have the system say in the 19th or the 20th century, people like Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King who were going against the law, they would not be allowed to come in because they had a criminal record. That just goes to show that the law is not always right and that we shouldn't always trust the law when making these decisions. Okay, sounds good. So Varnika, let's talk about social media, right? How many of you are on social media? Raise your hands.
I should ask, how many of you are not on social media? Okay, I see. Oh, cool. Okay, I see a few hands there. Believe me, you all are sane. So, Marnika, my question to you is, social media, or let's talk about even media, has played a major role in not just about the public opinions on immigration, but also sometimes has shifted or influenced some of the policies, right?
Yeah.
How do you think media has been playing or has played a role in major policies for immigration in the past?
I think now more than ever, going into the 21st century, social media, the media, it's a major bridge. It's a connector between policies, the government, law, and the actual people. I think a lot of people my age, and other people too, often choose to voice their concerns, ideas, and opinions on social media. Like, I know more than ever recently with the Heartbeat bill, a lot of people that I know are voicing their opinions on it through their Instagram or Snapchat, just to get the word out, just to get the message out. And I think the same policy really applies to the idea of like what's going on with immigration right now. I think what we put into the media is often becomes the ideology that people choose to follow. So like putting it into terms where if there's lots of like things in the media about like, let's just give it an example about like refugees, that all refugees are somehow inherently bad. And if that's what's being put into the media, then that's what the output's going to be. That's what the people are going to see. That's how their ideas are going to be shaped. And then the outcomes we're going to be seeing in policies, because we the people in our country at very least, we're a democracy. We vote on ideas, we vote on policies. So if those are the things being put into the media, then that's the outcome we're going to see.
Okay, great. And have you put anything on your social media about what your thoughts are on immigration, or does that scare you to even put it out there?
Not really. I think I as a person really haven't made up completely like what I think in terms of immigration. I don't think I have like a 100% definition on that. I think that's always changing. But I would say that I have voiced my opinions on other topics that I think are really important through social media.
Great, thank you. Sky, my question to you is, what will addition of 1 million more immigrants to the state of Georgia do? What will happen to the transportation system? What will happen to the water security system? What will happen to electricity and just the infrastructure, right? And are the metropolitan areas, are they ready to cope with such an influx?
I definitely think the influx of millions of immigrants added to Georgia's current population, I think it does have its positive and negative aspects. You think about things such as the environment, that's people buying millions of more cars, which is ultimately creating the exhaust that's going into the ozone, and it's diminishing, which creates a hotter environment. That affects things like animals in their current habitats, building businesses, that creates deforestation. Animals that call Georgia home are being driven out, but I think they also, a misconception that we as Americans do have is that immigrants, when coming over, they're not paying taxes, and even something so as simple as a sales tax is going back into the economy, and we're building new infrastructures and paving roads, and although it does have its negative aspects, they are creating more positive things. As well as the metropolitan areas, I don't think Georgia will have a hard time coping with the influx of more Georgians. We're a very diverse state. Them coming in will create more businesses that are ethnically specific to people's needs, and it will create more of an environment where we're open about our ethnic backgrounds, religions, and things like that.
Did you talk about legal or the illegal influx of immigrants?
I believe both. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Shireen, let's talk about one of the topics that we've been talking about, but there's no real solution yet. The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or also known as DACA, right? So across US, there are 690,000 such individuals. In Georgia, we have around 22,000 recipients, DACA recipients in Georgia. If the powers are vested on you, and you had a minute to sign the policy on immigration, what would that be?
So there's been multiple things that have been like brought up in Congress about DACA specifically, but I think the most policy that's been like well known across like America is the DREAM Act, which was introduced by President Obama. Basically, I'd sign off on like the DREAM Act, basically giving anybody who's been a resident in the United States for 5 years legal status, as like have an opportunity to have permanent U.S. citizenship in the United States, because like they've worked already so hard. Like they shouldn't just be deported because of some mistake that like for like any of these mistakes that people try to isolate. They say, oh, it's their fault for coming in, but realize that they were just trying to like provide a better life for their children, and they shouldn't be punished for this. So I'd immediately sign off on the DREAM Act.
Okay, thank you, Shireen. So I have a 10 to 15 second question for each of you as we are going to conclude the session in a few minutes. Can you identify some misconceptions that have to do with immigrant visas and how best to overcome them? And it can be similar to your next panelist, but just your own thoughts.
I think a really big misconception we have right now is the effect that immigrants have on our economy, both legal and illegal. There's a really big idea that immigrants are coming in and taking our jobs. This was previously addressed too, and I think there's two fronts to this. There's the white collar jobs that H-1B workers come in on, these high skilled workers that bring in ideas. And while it might be adding more competition to the job market, I think there's, if anything, a need for these workers to bring ideas into our nation and make it better. But then on the second aspect of blue-collared workers, these blue-collared workers that have lower-level jobs, this is the very basis and funding of our nation. If we don't have these blue-collar jobs, then I'd say there's no room for the rest of us.
Great, thank you. Anirudh.
I would just like to say that I think there should be similar to what she said. In the support of an H1, more proportion of visas to go to H1B. It's basically the Genius visa, which drives our economy. It drives innovation, and a lot of what we know today is from that. And just all the research, my dad, in his research, he's a research scientist at Georgia Tech. Probably 95% of the people in his lab are foreigners, are immigrants. At all universities, things like that, the research is being done by immigrants, and things are coming out of it. His research, his concept, in making airplanes, and the Boeing material that's made in Boeing airplanes and stuff like that. There's actual things that are benefiting from these type of visas, and I think just emphasizing them a little bit more.
Great, thank you, Sky. What are the misconceptions that exist for the immigrant visas, and how can we best address it?
I think a common misconception that we have is that the permanent residents, their visa, I think we often correlate that to someone who has citizenship, when in fact that isn't true. They're actually two separate things. Someone who is a permanent resident, yeah, they get a social security number, they get to live and work in the US, but they can't really travel too much. They have to, most of the time has to reside in the US, whereas someone who has citizenship, they're not denied rights such as voting. Someone who has a permanent resident visa, they're not allowed to vote. And it sort of makes them feel dehumanized when they don't have a right to speak up about problems that often involve them. Great. And I feel like the best way we can overcome it is having discussions like this and making people more aware about the topic so it can be tackled the right way.
And I would vote for having youth in those conversations, because I mostly see the policymakers and just the experts at the table. I think your thoughts are very important as you are the future leaders of our countries. Adiva, go ahead.
So one common misconception about immigration is that, especially in current administration, we've always heard that illegal immigrants are just flooding our borders and they're trying to enter the United States illegally and just take over, when actually most of the legal immigrants in the United States are actually living in the United States, and they are trying to be permanent residents. They're trying to renew their visas, and they're trying to add on to their economy. So this misconception is one that the media is trying to help, but in actuality, nothing much is being done. So we need more activism with immigration policy today.
I agree to that. Go ahead, Kennedy.
A common misconception I'd say that surrounds immigration is the idea that allowing more immigrants into the United States threatens American culture. This is a misconception, because American culture is in fact immigrant culture. So to address this misconception, we'd have to recognize that American culture, it's a conglomeration of all the immigrants who have come over here over time, from the Europeans to the Africans to the Latin Americans. Everyone who has come over here and taught America home has contributed to American culture, and that's what we have right now, and allowing more immigrants in is only going to add on to that.
Great, thank you. Ash?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions when talking about immigration is the idea of productivity, that every single person we let in has to do something great. I think we should really think about the people who are fleeing civil wars or persecution or other issues in their home country due to like international interventions or just failing governments within their countries, and letting them in to have like their lives saved or their families stuck together instead of them further experiencing more exploitation in their home countries. We should think about expanding our borders into be more inclusive of people who are literally dying in their own home countries, and instead of thinking just, oh, what can they do for the economy, thinking about what can we do for them with our booming economy.
Great. Rishi, thank you.
I think one misconception that is on immigrants is probably specifically on the DACA Act, that when immigrants come, that they bring their whole family, and that this is inherently bad. I truly believe that the DREAM Act, the DACA Act, should be in place, simply because of the fact that, like, to go back what I said earlier, is when somebody comes in is to have a chance for success, right? And they're not coming in just so that they can have kids here and then, let their kids do whatever they want. They want their kids to be successful. So I think there's a misconception that when people come in and use the DACA Act to their advantage, that this is bad, that they're kind of flooding our system, they're taking advantage of the system. And I believe that's simply wrong. They're not taking advantage of it to break the system. They're doing it so that these people can have a chance of success and that they can contribute to our society.
Omer?
I think one common misconception about visas and immigration is the fact that many people believe that people who try to overstay their visas and you try to achieve a better opportunity for themselves and for their families in the United States, that's a harmful thing to the United States and that's a negative thing. I think that's just not true, because the fact is America has and always will be a country of immigrants. It was built by immigrants or people who were, related to immigrants, like our founding fathers. Many of them were immigrants, or like the sons of immigrants, like Alexander Hamilton, as many of you know, and I learned from the Hamilton musical, he was an orphan and he was an immigrant. He helped to achieve America and make it a better country. But the fact is that Alexander Hamilton's not solely the person who can do that. It's other immigrants, other people who are trying to stay in the United States, other people who are trying to achieve legal residency through these visa programs. They should be given the opportunity too, and they should be given the ability to achieve like a permanent residency and to help not just themselves, but help better America as a whole and contribute to America. And I think that they're not a harmful thing; they're actually a beneficial thing to the United States.
Thank you, Shireen.
Okay, so to elaborate onto what Varnika was originally saying, one major misconception that comes along with visas is people taking other American jobs, right? So when people think of taking American jobs, they think of either the very big high paid workers and these high skilled workers who are coming in on these H-1B visas. To combat this, it's very common to see that many people are very inherently against these people who are coming in, taking these jobs and putting these other people out, putting these other people out of work. But in reality, what's happening is these workers are actually coming in and helping the innovation that goes on in the United States, helping all the new technology that's being advanced and built, and actually making the United States a better country for all.
Thank you. So before we can actually take one or two questions from the audience, but before that, I want your final thoughts on there is this fear, especially in these times, for people coming to US even for studies, further education from countries like India and other countries. If they were to give you a call or email you and ask you, should I or should I not, what would your answers be? And it can be as quick as yes or no with one sentence justification. Should they come to US or not? Should they pursue to come to US or just say, hey, my country is better, I'll just stay back?
I really think that there's a lot that goes into this. It really depends on like what country you're coming from. Like I know another issue that's going on is brain drain in other countries because we have so much talent coming into the United States, bringing in so much innovation. We're seeing a loss of talent to other countries, and there's no reason for the United States to be the only country with innovation. So I think while having students come in is a good thing, it can also be a bad thing in terms. But then again, if it's another country that's like it poses a threat to the student's life or isn't necessarily give them the opportunities that they need, then it's definitely beneficial for them to come here and pursue their dreams.
Yes, let's make it a quick answer with one sentence.
Yeah, they should come here because in the United States they would have an opportunity to, like, if they're fleeing something or just even if they're not fleeing anything, there's an opportunity here to rise up from lower levels and do well.
Such positivism. Thank you so much. Go
I
ahead, Sky.
definitely agree with the first two answers. I think there is a lot of opportunity in the U.S. that may not be found in other countries. I think it really does depend on the person and what they're trying to pursue, but I think they definitely should try.
I definitely agree with the first three answers. To pursue higher education, America has this idea of social mobility, and that can really help immigrants' lives.
Great. Thank you. Kennedy?
I actually disagree with the first four answers, simply for the fact that immigrants who are coming to this country who look like me, they are not going to be benefited by the social structure in the United States. And additionally, if you're educated by people who are not from your country, like the first answer said, there's going to be a brain drain from the home country. And additionally, you're going to be educated by people who are not going to help you go back and better your own home country.
Thank you.
I think it really depends on a case-by-case basis, but talking to people who think about immigrating to the country, I think we should really just give them courage and perseverance because it's obviously not an easy journey, but they also need to realize that America's not the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. There's still ups and downs that they have to realize that they'll go through when they get here too.
Thank you, Rishi. Your thoughts?
I agree with the first four answers simply because of the fact that the way America cultivates educations is different than other countries in that we prioritize creativity like more than other countries, not necessarily the best, but a lot more than probably the country that these people will be coming from. We prioritize creativity, we prioritize extracurriculars, we prioritize leadership, speaking, public speaking, right? We prioritize things that can really help a chance for success versus just being good in math or science, right? So I think the way that America cultivates education is a little bit different than other countries, and I do think that will make them successful.
Omer.
I think that if one of these immigrants were to come up to me and ask me whether or not they should come to the United States, I would tell them definitely, because the fact is, you're not going to achieve change without fighting for it. And you're not going to be able to achieve change without enough people coming together and, really going against and taking a stand. Because if we don't have all these people come to the United States, we're not going to be able to change their perceptions about immigrants. We're not going to be able to change people's views about immigrants and that fear that many people have. And the only way we can do that is by encouraging more people to come, take a stand, and fight for their ability to better themselves and achieve a life that they can be happy and successful in.
Shireen.
So I'd agree with the other people on this, the majority of the people on this panel. I agree that more people should come in on look at the education system in the United States. They can obviously in the end learn about the entire different education system that's going on here, and obviously they always have the option to go back to their own country and teach their own people about all these other opportunities that are offered in the United States.
Great. So we are able to take one or two questions from the audience, but I have a question for the immigration attorney here. Looks like, this is my assumption, the hardest law to practice nowadays is the immigration law because of the change in policies almost I would say every day. Is that true?
It is and it isn't. First of all, congratulations to all of you. I want to applaud you for getting up here and expressing your thoughts and your ideas on this panel. It's very intriguing to see where the next generation is thinking and how you're prioritizing immigration, which is undoubtedly a battle these days. The reason I say it is and it isn't difficult these days is because policies have changed, but laws have not. We had a discussion, you all had a discussion about enforcement of laws, and in today's day and age, we as immigration attorneys feel that we need to remind adjudicating officers and those alike that are looking at immigration petitions or benefits and remind them of what the law is, whether the policy changes or the directive changes or the politics changes. Until the law changes, the law is still the law, and our job is to get creative and use our skill sets that we have acquired, all soft skills in communication, interpretation, and getting the dialogue and the message across to anybody who's on the other side to tell you what the law is and how it should be interpreted and how it should be enforced in a moral and legal and compassionate manner.
Great. We can take one question. Anyone has questions from the audience? If no, that means the panel has really done a very good job. Yeah? So I do encourage people to stand up and speak up and understand more in their communities, as you all are doing. Get your friends involved in such topics. Talk about these topics in your school discussion, in your school debates, and help change or improve the public opinion about immigrations, because you're right, more than 90% of us, even in this room, came through those immigration visas, and we are bettering the country as well. Are you all planning to run for office in the future? Yes, no? I just want to see, who are planning to run for office at some point in the future? Even a school board? That's awesome. So thank you for listening. Thank you for participating today. Thank you to Winning Feathers Apurva for collaborating with us. Thank you, Parth. Thank you for Paramount Software for sponsoring this program. We have these monthly Chai and Just Chats. These are just sort of bringing up the conversations or starting the dialogues of some of the hardest topics to be discussed in public. The next one is on June 23rd, and it's about men and heart. And seems to be the #1 killer disease is the heart disease among men. So definitely participate. There's no cost to attend these events, and you can look up in the website for the upcoming events. So thank you again for